Welcome back to the show, The Unbroken. Sam Davis right here, your host, and this episode is powered by Intervention on Call, family coaching an hour at a time, on demand, virtually. If you need some one-on-one time with me or any of the other trusted providers that are on Intervention on Call, you can book a session right now for 1 hour where you and your family can get your questions answered, get the guidance and the strategy you need to overcome this family addiction that you're dealing with. So check us out, website interventiononcall.com. The info will be in the description. My guest today comes all the way from Philadelphia. I've known him for a little while. He's a person in long-term recovery. He's an author. He wrote the book Under Our Roof with he and his mother. And he is a public relations expert. He keeps me out of the ditch with what I do on social media. I'm glad to hear his story. Harry, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
It's good to be here.
Yeah.
It's good to be down in Virginia.
Yeah, it's a little different, isn't it?
It's a little different. It's been a good couple days.
Yeah, it's the same, but it's different. I noticed when we were in the truck today, you saw that I was waving at some people, and they would wave at me. And
Everywhere we went, somebody knows you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it is. It was hard to be a crackhead in that area.
I can only imagine. It was easier to hide in plain sight up in Philly.
Yeah, you didn't
You can get away with.
Yeah, I didn't maintain my anonymity very long in rural Virginia with my crack addiction.
I can see that.
Yeah, but I'm glad you're here, bud.
Thanks for having me down.
So, to get here to Richmond, to write a book, to be a person in long-term recovery, I'm sure that wasn't when you were in grade school what you wanted to do. So what did Harry want to do when he was little? Who is Harry, and where'd you grow up?
So I grew up just outside of Philadelphia, and the question takes me back, right? Because it's not something I've thought about recently. Who did I want to be? From my youngest memories, the people that I aspired to were Evel Knievel.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be a daredevil.
How old are you?
I'm 34.
34. And Evel Knievel was your guy.
He was my guy. Evel Knievel. We were always out growing up. My dad was in the bike industry, so we always had a lot of bikes. So we would make ramps and jumps and, would try all sorts of stuff. But that thrill, I loved the adrenaline.
Right. You talking about dirt bikes, motorbikes?
No, just bicycles.
Just bicycles.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't let us have my mom would not let us get any dirt bikes. But yeah, bicycles. And, but what I loved about, Evel Knievel or, some of the other people I looked up to were like Steve Irwin, who was out, catching alligators.
Yeah.
And, but I aspired to that level of fearlessness. Like that, as a young kid, I saw that, and that's not how I felt, right? Like I grew up in an incredibly loving home with, amazing people all around me and love and support. But I had this sense of fear in me. So like when I saw somebody, like jumping over the Grand Canyon on a dirt bike or, jumping on a crocodile's back, there was something about that as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old little kid that, I just thought was so cool.
Because you had fear, you said?
Yeah.
You grew up with fear?
Yeah.
Like as far back as you can remember, you were like anxiety, anxious fear. I mean, how did it manifest? How did you know that?
I don't know when it kicked in. If I look back, I feel like I had a great childhood.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I did. I don't feel like I had this crippling fear, but I had this, I guess as I started to get a little bit older, closer to being a teenager, I just had this sense of discontent. Like I kind of, I never felt as confident in my own skin, as other people appeared. I've since learned like everybody's got, some concerns or issues with self-confidence and esteem and all of that. But like I felt for me, that was like acutely, painful.
It was your default.
Yeah, it was my default, to compare myself to everybody around me. And, I could see all of the good in others and would often be like blinded in it, when I looked in the mirror.
Right. But you had a loving family.
Absolutely.
No trauma,
Nothing.
History of family addiction, alcoholism.
No trauma. I've got, 2 incredible parents that, are still together. I'm the middle of, 3 boys. Growing up, it was really, pretty much kind of like, the perfect, what you would imagine. for a childhood. We went to great schools.
Right.
My grandparents on my dad's side were around, and, we would see them. We'd play with my cousins. Everybody kind of lived close.
Just an all-American family.
Just an all-American family.
Where do you think this comes from, man? Like you're walking around with a level of anxiety and fear that is 10x what others are feeling, but there's no way for you to really know that or understand that at the time. But how's this thing starting with us? I mean, you get people that have trauma, that are obvious traumatic events where you can say, well, hey, no wonder, man.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder. Do you have divorced parents that divorce when they're young, and there could have been some belief systems formulated by the kids or what have you? There's usually something that you can point to and say, well, there's a factor.
Yeah.
But you're the second one in a row that I've interviewed where there was none of that. None of that. Like, what do you think happens? What do you think is behind all of this? Because so many people on social media, everybody seems to have a cause of addiction.
Yeah, I think it would be easier if we had it, right? Like, we want to blame, we want to find the reason and, make sense of it all. And I think part of it is, like, it's the human condition to feel a little bit discontent at times. And I think for us, who have experienced that, like, maybe it's more amplified. I don't know. I've never been in anybody else's, head to know how they feel. But I think everybody has a little bit of that sense. And maybe in, somebody like me, it's amplified. But what we find is, as soon as we find some of these substances or alcohol or drugs, they work, right? And they really target those feelings, and they shut them off, and they create a sense of connection and community, and the fear is gone, the anxiety is gone. And in the beginning, without the consequences, it's like, this is the perfect solution.
Yeah.
But I'm not smart enough to know, what the cause is. But what I can say is, I think if I look around, at sort of society today, I think everybody's dealing with some level of discontentment. Yeah. And I think for us, where we find a solution to that is just really, really apparent. It causes big problems.
Most definitely. Yeah. Man, I remember when there was a skating rink in town. It was an old tobacco warehouse. Everybody, when they weren't selling tobacco in the summer months, and spring and summer was the skating rink. And the whole community would go. And I was just a little kid. This was before I was molested at 10 years old. I was stuttering like crazy. I couldn't hardly put a sentence together. So I was uncomfortable in school. I was uncomfortable in settings where I had to talk and communicate, maybe at the lunch table, at the cafeteria, speak in class, any of that. I'd rather go to jail than do that. Even at that age, like, lock me up, instead of making me do that. But at the skating rink, I did not mind a crowd. I did not mind. I was okay in crowds that wasn't a skating rink as long as I didn't have to talk and communicate. I was all right. I can remember that I had no anxiety around being around a crowd if I didn't have to talk. At the skating rink, there wasn't a lot of talking. You were just skating and listening to music. And it was crowded. I was completely comfortable. Yeah. Totally comfortable. Wasn't even a thought. But after I was molested, and then, as the reaction to that, how I reacted to all of that and the agreements that I made with myself is like immediately, like, I didn't want to be around crowds. Like, you tell me we're going to a party or telling me we're going to the concert, it raised a level of anxiety within me that I just would have rather crawled in a hole and just disappeared. Yeah.
Do you feel like before that you were almost isolating in the crowd, though? Like, you felt comfortable, but you were, you said you didn't want to talk to
absolutely.
anybody. You were kind of isolating already before.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was starting I didn't have to talk to you. I just go around in circles. Yeah, it was isolation, but I was comfortable in it. Yeah, and I knew I wasn't going to have to talk to a whole lot of people. I could talk to my sister, and people already knew that I started and accepted me. But,
but you're still connected because you're doing something together.
Yeah. So were you just experimenting? What was the first thing you experimented was? Just as every other teenager does, it just started out as experimentation?
Yeah, I mean, really, so like I sort of, again, like typical child. I went through the DARE program, and
Did you get your shirt?
I didn't get the shirt. I actually, it's funny, in hindsight, I missed the graduation day, and I was really upset about it at the time because I didn't get the certificate, and I missed it. But no, I went through that, and I remember, like, in health class in, fifth grade or whenever it was, they'd show pictures of people's teeth from smoking cigarettes even. And, I remember at that age, I couldn't believe, I couldn't ever imagine that, I would do any of those things. And I swore it all off, but what happened for me was, I remember the first time I was exposed, I was given the opportunity to drink alcohol was, right at the end of grade school, before high school. I was at a friend's house for a party, and a couple of the guys, had some beers in a red Solo cup, and, they were out kind of by the woods. And that first time I was so angry. I was angry at them, right? Like, how could you do this? I couldn't even believe it.
Like, y'all are bad.
Yeah. Like I
Dirt
thought
bags.
we were in it together. Like,
Right.
we're not, we said we're not doing this.
Right. Y'all are no longer wholesome.
Yeah. And like, that was like, I believed through what I had been taught that like drugs and alcohol are bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a foundational core belief that I had that came to bite me later. But that first time when I saw that, I got angry and I didn't participate, and I got angry at my friends, and I went and I did my own thing, and I just kind of let it be. But what happened after that, it was a couple months, probably a month or two later, I had started, like, from that night, I started to kind of think about it a little bit. And I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family, and everybody drinks, and, people that I looked up to and admire drink alcohol. And, so all of a sudden I started to have these questions of like, look, I've been taught that this is bad, right? That people who do this are bad people.
I've been manipulated.
And
Right.
So then, I started to, I'm a young teenager, and I'm questioning everything, and I'm pushing
Right.
boundaries. And in my mind, I'm sort of turning over that idea of like, wait, is it really? And I made the decision before I had the next opportunity that the next time there was an opportunity, I was going to try it.
Right.
And, it wasn't that much long after that. We were out in the woods on a little golf course on a Friday night after school. And I took my first sip of alcohol. And that first night, what's funny is, I drank a little bit. I didn't get drunk. I didn't drink enough to get drunk. I drank enough to upset my stomach. So all I did, the only effect I got from alcohol the first time I drank was I threw up.
Right.
I didn't feel good.
Right.
But I felt a part of that group. I felt
Yeah.
like we were trying something together. We were doing something together. And I knew I wanted to try it again.
Yeah.
And the next weekend we were back in that same field doing that same thing. And I drank enough to get drunk.
It was getting away with something.
Yeah, it was getting away
It
with
was you're
something.
you're part of a community of others.
Well,
your
also as a
peers that
young,
were- yeah.
as a young teenage boy, it felt like I was, like I was growing up. I was doing something that, that men do. And I felt like it was sort of this thing that was cooler than it was, right? Because that's just kind of how it was portrayed. But that next time I did get drunk, and I remember just feeling so connected, right? And like I remember that that discontent that I had as a kid, that fear, that anxiety, whatever you want to call it, that night it just went away. And the other thing that happened was I didn't get caught.
And
Right.
you didn't get sick?
I didn't get sick. I
Man,
didn't
that's
get
like
caught.
the perfect perfect night. You didn't get sick, you didn't get caught.
Yeah. And
No
then we
fear.
chase it,
Yeah.
and then we chase it.
Yeah.
But, I remember like looking up at the sky that night and just feeling a part of, like feeling like for the first time in a few years that I wasn't worried about what my friends thought of me. I wasn't comparing myself to anybody else. I was just okay.
Yeah. You were present in the moment.
I was present in the moment.
Yeah.
I was present in the moment.
I know that one. Now we can experience that.
Yeah.
I don't experience it on the daily. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't experience it on the daily, but I experience it quite often, and it's not a thing in my system, but I feel like you're talking about looking up at the sky, feeling connected.
Yeah.
I spent, probably $1 million in cocaine over the years that I did cocaine and the pills, easily $1 million in cash, lost opportunities, homes, relationships, reputations, all of that just to feel what I felt maybe the other day, but when I was in Hawaii looking out at the rainbow that was over. Sober as a judge.
Just in the moment. Yeah. Out of your head.
Yeah. So, how'd it get bad?
So for me, what ended up happening from there was, pretty quickly, I looked at alcohol as something I was never going to do. Right. And then, I kind of talk about my nevers. Right. And it's, when we think about someone who's struggling with drug addiction, I know so many people are like, well, how did they get there? Right. Like what you were just talking about with the cocaine, and it doesn't usually start there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, but for me, it was kind of just chipping away at these things that I would never do. And the next one that came right after that was, just smoking marijuana, and that for me became something that I could do before school. I didn't have to wait for the weekend to drink. I could smoke marijuana all the time. And again, I was able to do this and feel that same feeling, that feeling of being in the moment, that feeling of contentment and peace all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to chase that. And I remember thinking like I would be with my friends. And at the time it was, using was a very social experience, and we would be with each other. And I remember like one night I was literally having a conversation, and I was like, why is everyone not doing this? Like I couldn't understand why everybody wasn't doing it. And I had this vision of my life, that I would somehow get to be an old man, and I'd have, a family all around me, and I would just be sitting on the porch smoking pot.
Right.
And that was kind of the goal. But what happened was, as you know, other opportunities came up, and I found myself, using cocaine and getting hooked on that. And I'll fast forward a little bit, right? So, through my high school, nothing bad happened, right? I used constantly, but nothing bad.
No
really
consequences.
happened. No real consequences.
Did your family know? Did they have any hint at all that you were getting high through
Not
school?
really. So until the end. So what ended up happening was, through my junior year, my life is kind of like internally falling apart, but outside looks really good. My grades are still good. I did well on my SATs. I got a ton of scholarships to colleges, and I sort of looked at it like, I'm doing this, but on the outside, everything is still coming together. And,
right.
My parents were concerned when, I think it was sophomore year, I dropped all sports, because I didn't have time for it anymore. And, my friend group changed, and, so they had concerns, but they didn't have any idea
Mm-hmm.
as to the extent of what was going on.
Did they know that you drank?
They knew I was drinking a little bit.
They were a little cool with drinking?
Not really. They never caught me, they caught me one time because a bunch of my friends got arrested for underage, and I, was able to get away.
All right.
But I had to call and get picked up because
Right.
everybody was,
Everybody else was busted.
Everybody else was busted. And it was funny. My parents were sitting at home, and just again, like this is where the way that as a society we look at alcohol is so different, right? Like my parents had a bar in the house, and they were in the house with their friends who happened to be my friends' parents.
Right.
And they're sitting there, on a weekend night, and everybody's just kind of drinking and hanging out. And we're doing the same thing. We're just not allowed because we're, 14, 15 years old in a field somewhere else. But so, my parents are with these other parents who start getting phone calls saying, hey, you got to come pick up your kid.
Their phone hadn't rung yet.
Their phone didn't ring. So, then all of a sudden it was like, all right, they got to come pick me up. And that night they knew, right? Like that night I was drunk and I was caught. And, but other than that, they really never definitively caught me with drugs. They never caught me, drunk or high.
Was there any consequences for that night?
I think, I got grounded for a month or so, but it was, again, by that point in time, I was like, alcohol as a defiant, teenage kid. I was like, well, everybody drinks alcohol. So, you're grounding me only because I'm not 21, but like, there's nothing really wrong with this. That's how I viewed it.
Right.
But towards the second half of senior year in high school, I'm going to school one day, and I went to, a nice kind of prep school, so we had to wear a blazer and a tie, and, I'm coming in looking completely disheveled. And, I'm walking up the steps of the school. I'm trying to tie my tie real quick, and I'm late, as usual. I had gotten high in the morning, and the dean of the school was standing on the steps waiting for me. He's like, Harry, you need to come with me.
He was waiting on you.
He was waiting on me. He says, Harry, you need to come with me to my office.
Right. How many people were in this school? It's a big school?
There was about 1,000 people there.
1,000 people, and he's waiting on Harry Cunnane to come
He's
up
waiting
to.
on me.
Okay.
He was waiting just for me.
All right.
And I don't know how long he was waiting because I was a little bit late.
Right.
But, I missed
He was
homeroom.
committed.
He was committed. He was at the front steps waiting for me.
Right. All right.
but he brings me to my office. He searches my backpack. He, wants to go through my locker, and he says, look, I know you're getting high. And I deny everything, And, he's like, all right, well, we're going to call your parents. And they call my mom, who was teaching at a local university, and say, hey, you gotta come get him. We want him to go get a drug test. And, so after school, I had to sit in his office all day. And then after school, I went, with my mom to go to Quest Diagnostics to take a drug test. And it came up at that point, it just came up for marijuana, but it came up for marijuana, and I got suspended from school, sort of like a quick in-school suspension. And nobody really knew what to do about it. And what I think when I look back is at that point in time, it was all just punitive, right? Like nobody was like, hey man, you all right? Do you need help? Is there something wrong?
Yeah,
Is there something going on? Why are you doing this?
Right.
Everything's going well, but why are you doing this? It was more of I just completely viewed it as a punishment. And I was like, they don't get it. I already have these scholarships. I'm going to college. And, my mom then wanted me to get a clean drug test, and she started drug testing me more at home. And so she knew what was going on, but like you could feel the tension in our house when a drug test was coming. So like I could start doing what I could to try to, clean up the test. And there was usually like 3 to 5 days.
You could feel it.
You could feel the tension in our house when it was coming. Yeah. You knew it was coming.
They were terrified.
And they didn't know what to do about it. And, my parents struggled with, my mom wanted to test me. My dad, didn't want to. He thought that was kind of like a breach of trust with his kids. He didn't want to be in that position to do that.
What do you think now? Because I get families that contact me and we're talking, and some of the prior attempts they've made is that they've been the one drug testing their kid or their husband or their wife or their sister or whoever, grandma even, and they're like, I always am like, that's really not a role you want to be in. You place yourself in a position where it's going to breed resentment and dishonesty, and it really puts you in a position to be the cop or a probation officer, and that's not the role of a wife or a husband or a mom and dad. I know the drug test. I mean, I've drug tested my kid just randomly, like, hey, it's required by Davis law that you get drug tested if you want to drive one of our vehicles, But he's, passed. I'm sure he's, how that happened, but he did. But I can understand, because there's also a professional that I respect, and he'll talk about with adolescents. I can understand adolescents, but your adult or 17, 18, I just think it needs to be done by someone in the middle. Yeah, someone that's not related.
Yeah, it's a hard. I mean, it was hard for me, but like in hindsight, it was a harder spot for my mom to be in, to feel like that. And it caused so much conflict. And all of a sudden she's the cop, and she's trying to do this. And
what's the consequence if you fail? Like, what was there?
There wasn't much. It was, I'd get grounded, or we're taking your phone away, or, something like that. And it was, but again, like usually there was enough time where, if I was using something else, right? Like I could usually kind of get either the cocaine or, opioids out of my system, because the pressure would build and we would see it. So I'd pass just for marijuana. And again, it's like, as a parent, it's like, well, is that, what do we do about that? A lot of kids experiment with that, but it made for a really hard dynamic. My mom and I battled constantly, and my brothers, like everybody could feel it. The house was tense. But at school, it was sort of like this, well, what next? And what did end up happening from that was, there was, as much as I was defiant and I fought it and I, didn't think it was a problem, I started to, I was like, well, why can't I just stop to get one clean test, right? Like I just want to get everything out of my system for one clean test. And I realized that wasn't happening for me. I didn't see it as the problem.
Sucked. Every couple of weeks or whenever you got the tension.
Yeah, it was the conflict, and it was uncomfortable. And I wanted once to be able to, almost get a clean one just so I could say, like, I told you so. But I couldn't, right? So, my thinking at the time was, I got accepted to 13 colleges, and I was like, I could go kind of anywhere. And I decided to go to College of Charleston, South Carolina, because I didn't know anyone. I thought I could have a fresh start, start over, and it go back to like it was that first night on the golf course when, before I had gotten in any of this mess.
That
If it just
connection.
connected, right?
Yeah. So let me jump in. Let me interrupt you there a little bit. Is that your family's watching you? Because I'm sure there's a lot of families that have had very similar situations or currently in that situation where they're drug testing you.
Mm-hmm.
They are completely unaware that you're having these thoughts within you going, hey, why can't I?
Yeah.
Why can't I pass a drug test? Like, wait a minute, this is kind of, my math isn't mathing because I don't have a problem yet. I can't pass a drug test when I already have experience to show I hate the situation that I get in with my family when the drug test pops up and I know I'm going to fail and they know I'm going to fail. They wonder if I'm going to fail. Mm-hmm. But yet I can't pass drug test. Did your mind go to, or did your actions and your mind go to, all right, well, I guess I just have to it's mom's fault for testing me all the time? Did you go to blame them? Did you flip into a victim role? Yeah, outwardly.
Outwardly, yeah. I would blame them. I would try to minimize it. It wasn't, like I was having that thought, right? So, again, like what I'm actually doing at this point in time, end of high school, I'm using cocaine in school, which even that was something I was starting to hide from my friends because my friends weren't cool with that. Mm-hmm. And again, I had this experience as a young kid through the DARE program and my education that drugs are bad and people who use drugs are bad.
Yeah.
So I had this self-esteem issue.
That was the message. It's bad, and if you do it, you're bad.
And so by then, I'm starting to feel like I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
Right? But I also feel like I need this.
But dude, you're doing blow in high school?
Yeah.
In class?
Yeah,
like
during
during
the
day?
bathroom, but yeah.
Aren't you paranoid? Man, I'd be flipping out. There's no way I could have enjoyed myself doing that.
Because for me, at the time, again, it was one of those nevers, but it seemed natural. Right? Alcohol, I knew I couldn't use during the day because it'd be too obvious. And then with marijuana, it was the same thing. I was like, oh, they can smell this.
Yeah.
So as an ignorant, teenager, I thought, well, if it's cocaine, nobody can notice. It doesn't smell like anything. Nobody can notice.
Yeah, they will never notice you.
So I thought I had everybody. I thought I would have everybody fooled.
Yeah.
But I knew, even then, years before I got help, years before I admitted to anybody else that I had a problem, I knew that I didn't like what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like I had to keep doing it. So my decision was I'm just going to go off to college and I'm going to go as far away, where I know nobody, none of my friends are going here. It's a fresh start. I'm going to stop the cocaine. I'll stop smoking pot. I'm just going to go back to just drinking. It's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've learned in recovery an expression that I love of wherever I go, I bring myself with me. But I get there. And my roommate, first night, he's like, hey, you smoke? I was like, yeah, I smoke. And then,
of course,
it was right back, and then we're doing everything else down there.
Outside of the confines of being with mom and dad.
Yeah.
Did it escalate?
At Charleston, honestly, it kind of stayed about the same, right? But what ended up happening was I realized that, like, if I'm down here and none of my friends are here and I'm still doing the same stuff, I might as well get back to Philly. So after that first semester there, I left and went back to Philly. And what happened when I got to Philly was all of my friends had shifted from, marijuana and a little bit of cocaine to opioids, right? Perks and oxys. And that was what everybody was doing. And, I got back home. I went to a local school where my mom was teaching. I didn't kind of know which direction I was going. So I went to where she was a professor because it was totally
Were they challenging you at any time, mom, dad? Like, hey, what the hell are you doing? You one semester in and you're coming back to Philly?
But what happened was when I was at Charleston, I was able to maintain, I got a 3.75 GPA. So I was able to show them. They hadn't really seen me much in person because I was down there. They still were worried about, well, what am I doing? But like I had this piece of paper from the end of that semester that said I did really, really well in school. So they were a little bit like I came home with a little bit more of like, okay, maybe he's okay. But they were worried, and when I got back to Philly, things went off the rails really, really fast.
Looking back, in all honesty, do you think that college, going to university, should have been on the table, given the experiences your family were having with you? It's a tough call, isn't it?
It's a really tough call. I don't know the answer. I think it's an impossible thing to say for sure, right? Like, I think probably looking at, starting a little bit smaller community college and maybe not jumping into the full experience might have made more sense. But, I don't know. I look at least at my own story, and it's like everything worked out the way that it was supposed to work out.
Sure. And I'm not saying they made a mistake. It's just, you wonder, question. Families ask that all the time, and they experience that all the time. I'm like, I get that. Well, he started in high school, he was smoking pot, and he was...
Yeah, and then it went off the rails.
He kind of was starting to become stagnant, and we sent him to college, and,
Yeah.
So it's a tough position for families to be in and wonder what is the right decision. There really is no way to really know at that time.
Yeah.
Because you weren't coming off the rails. There weren't a lot of consequences.
No.
Just
it looked
it up
fine.
to,
I never got arrested. Like all of these external things, they were kind of like borderline, but everything was like, it was okay. There was enough for me to fight back.
Yeah.
Right. And say like, it's not that bad. You're overreacting. And like, and I would flip the blame back onto them. It's everybody's doing this. This is normal.
Yeah. Y'all are too overprotective. You're overthinking this thing.
And it's hard to argue with that sometimes until something major happens.
Yeah. You chalk it up to experimenting, kids being kids, teenagers being teenagers.
And as a parent, where's the line?
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not there. Like, my mom and I, we can get into this a little later, but, like since we wrote a book together about what really happened and what our experience was, and she was shocked when she saw what was actually happening, what the real timeline and the progression looked like. Because she knew it was bad. She just had that instinct as a mom. She knew it was bad, and my dad did too. But to see what was actually happening,
versus what they thought.
What they thought. Yeah. And they were worried about what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I tell families all the time, every single family I work with, I tell them is, look, whatever you know, there's more to it than that.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot more to than what you think you know. And so if what you know is terrifying you, there's things that you don't know. It's probably best that you don't know.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
But on the flip of that, there's also your loved ones having experiences that you don't know about. Your loved ones are having experiences of shame and guilt and thoughts in their head, just like you were having about, why can't I quit?
Yeah.
That you never know about.
No. Well, when you're, like for me, when I was in the confrontation with my parents, I had to be defensive. I had to try to justify living the way that I was living.
You're going to die on that hill.
I'm not going to show them what I really feel.
Yeah.
And that like, I know this is bad. I know I'm, sort of jammed up over here, and I don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah, because the message I'm getting in school from Dare and from TV and from grown-ups and from everywhere else is drugs are bad, and if you do them, you're bad.
Yeah.
To even try, like, that's bad.
Yeah.
Doing it at the level I'm doing it, where I'm the only one that knows the level I'm doing it. Yeah. I'm not just bad. I'm a horrible person. Like, I'm garbage. I'm trash. There's no way I'm telling anybody.
No, I mean, I would lie to my drug dealers. Say I was getting some for friends. Like, I didn't even want them to know that it was for me.
I'm selling
because I felt, it's like, I got it, it's for a few of us. It's like, no, it's not. But like, that's the insanity of like, I thought, I was worried about them judging me.
Right.
Because of how much I judged myself.
Right.
Like the internal shame that I felt was so strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that keeps us sick.
Yeah.
Right. Like that, that's why for years, like asking for help wasn't an option. Even if I may have wanted to stop, but like asking for help or, like we talk a lot about, in this field today, like we talk about the stigma, and there's stigma on the use, but there's a huge stigma on the help.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like just going to treatment is stigmatized. Mm-hmm. Like we stigmatize the solution, which scares people from putting their hand up and getting help, because it's like, if I do that, then I'm admitting to this.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm just validating all of those things.
Yeah.
All those things that I feel about myself become real the second I put it out there.
Today, there are a lot of people that won't seek the help, that want to get the help, that acknowledge that, hey, I'm a wreck. I need to go to rehab, but will not go to rehab
Yeah.
Because they're terrified that their company's going to find out, their employer's going to find out, the life insurance is going to find, whatever is going to find out and punish them or cancel them or fire them or whatever. You know, tell you another thing about the stigma is we ourselves, the addicted individuals, oftentimes in recovery can keep the stigma going without even realizing about talking about the stigma all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, the more, it's like the more, if we put it all on that one thing, like the stigma in my mind is there because it's all about the drink or the drug. It's not, right? Like, sitting across from you, it's like we're just two people.
Mm-hmm.
Being in recovery is a part of our experience. Use is a part of our experience. But like, if you try to just put that one label, and it's like, that's not all that I am.
No.
But like, that's what we try to put a label on stuff.
You've been sober how long now?
A little over 12 years.
A little over 12 years. Are you finding that your story becomes shorter and shorter? The addicted part of your story, the story of where it's such, for me now, it's such a, it was several years and a lot happened, but it gets shorter and smaller and smaller because my life is getting larger and larger.
Yeah. And you're filling that life with stuff. It's not like, like what I was afraid of when I got the treatment was I was going to have this miserable life. Because again, it went back to like, I thought treatment was all about, I have to stop this thing. It wasn't what I could get. It wasn't what I could benefit from once that happened. It was like, okay, you stop this one thing, but then you get a full life. Yeah. So it's like, I'm the same way. What I thought my life would look like, my outlook the day I got the treatment for my life was so small. Like it was so small where I thought I could go. I had no self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I was going anywhere. But I thought maybe, just maybe, if I can stop using drugs, then I won't be in as much pain. Right? And I don't even have to do anything else, and that would be worth it. If I just get out of this pain.
Yeah, just make the pain stop.
Yeah.
Because that's all you're really trying to do is make the pain stop anyway with every time you use.
Yeah.
Did they intervene on you, or how did it come to where, oh shit, we got to do something with Harry?
So, fast forward a little bit, and I'll tell you kind of like what happened towards the end of my run, kind of like the last year. At 20 years old, so just a little bit after I moved back to Philly and I'm in school, I dropped out of college. I'm completely hooked on opioids. And
we snorting them, banging them?
Yeah, snorting them.
Snorting them?
Yeah. Yeah. Just the perk pills, perk 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And completely hooked. All of my money goes there. All of my time, all of my focus, everything. It's all I care about. I'm just in survival mode. I just need to get more of these just to get through the day.
God,
it's just survival.
That sucks so bad.
It was awful.
That sucks, man.
It was awful. But at 20 years old, I'm living like that. And what happens is this girl that I'm kind of seeing at the time gets pregnant. And I find out at 20, with a lifestyle like that I'm going to become a dad. And I get this.
And she couldn't have been the epitome of emotional health.
No, she was great. She was great. She had no idea. She had no idea what I was doing.
Because typically,
I met her at school. She was.
I stand corrected.
She was blindsided by all this.
Right. She had no idea you were a fiend. You were an addict. No clue.
No clue. But in that moment, I find out. And I know how much shame I feel, but I feel hope for the first time, really kind of ever since I had started this process of like trying to stop a little bit.
Right.
And before that, I had kind of given up that like I wasn't going to stop. It was just, this is what my life was going to look like. But in that moment, when I find out I'm going to become a dad, I'm filled with hope because I'm convinced that like having a baby is going to save me. I'm going to stop because I've got an incredible father in my life. Right. And I look up to him and I want to be just like him as a dad, and I know that I can't keep living this way and be that type of dad for this new baby girl that's coming. And so I put every bit of willpower that I have over the next, 9 months into trying to stop using. And at the very end of the pregnancy, I taper myself off of everything. I do a cold turkey. I stop. And I walk into the delivery room completely sober. And I'm convinced because I just went through this. I just was able to actually wean myself off for the first time in my life. I went through the withdrawal. I survived it. And I'm there and I've got a clear mind and my daughter is born. And the first thing that I do, because I have no other skills, I didn't tell anybody what I was going through. The first thing I do is I call my best friend, who happens to be my drug dealer, and I say, hey, man, you got to come to the hospital and see this baby, and we got to celebrate. And before I even left the hospital, I'm getting high again.
Without even
thinking about it. I have a vivid memory of I'm in his car in the parking garage of that hospital. And while we are getting high, I'm telling him how I beat this thing, how I did it, how I stopped, because I had just stopped. And I'm telling him, like, here's the system. Here's how you get clean. I just figured it out.
And
I don't even see it. And I don't even see it. Like, I'm completely blind.
Did he see it?
No. Or maybe he did, but, whether he did or he didn't, he didn't call me out on it. And, I don't think he cared because it was just like, but I was blindsided by that. I hadn't been taught any principles about, how this thing actually works.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't understand that, like, it was just that one that was going to get me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I can just do one. I already stopped.
But it's the one that
I can do one.
Yeah.
So from that moment, for the first year of my daughter's life, I did everything that I could to try stopping. I switched over to Suboxone that I was buying from the street. I never went and saw a doctor. Again, I'm afraid to ask for help. I can't let anybody know what I'm doing because now I'm a father and I'm going to work every day. And I'm trying to sort of portray this image of something that's not real to try to show everybody that I'm a good dad and I'm there. And my daughter's mother and I are, living at my parents' house. We moved back in there. We've got this baby. And
what's your family thinking at this point?
I think it's a mix, right? Like, there's moments where they're scared. There's moments where, I think I made it look like I was kind of pulling it together and maybe it was going to be okay. And
they're looking for that.
They're looking for it. They're
looking for those points where, okay, he's not high.
It's a little bit better.
Yeah.
He's going to work every day.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing this. He doesn't, his money doesn't last, but, they got a kid and, so the lead up to my daughter's birthday it's October 2012. My daughter's about to turn 1. It's the weekend of, Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, if you remember that.
Yeah.
It kind of blew through the Northeast.
Yeah, destroyed Jersey.
Yeah. And so we're in the Philadelphia suburbs at that time. And, it's like the mayor comes on, they're shutting down the city. I got to go cop. I got to get enough for the weekend. My daughter's birthday party's on Sunday. And, so on Friday night, I asked my mom, which is a normal thing. I was like, hey, Mom, can I, get some cash to kind of get me through the weekend? She said to me on Friday, she said, there's a problem with our bank account. I don't know what's going on, but I can't get you anything. And I knew in that moment I was caught because for the past few weeks, I had been taking their ATM card and draining their bank account. And so I knew as soon as she said there's a problem with the bank account, she's going to go to the bank and she's going to figure out what's going on. So I had from Friday night until Tuesday when I was confronted to think of an excuse. And I had been, we had been through this battle before, right? So I had days now and I'm quick on my feet usually with a story that sounds, crazy as to what happened and why I need the money and how I was going to pay it back and, all of that. But Tuesday came, the storm blew through. We got through my, daughter's birthday and it's Tuesday morning and I go downstairs and on our dining room table is just all these bank statements. And on the bank statements, there's just highlighters.
Yeah.
Highlighters. And I just knew, right? Like they didn't have an interventionist, they didn't know what to do. But I go down and I see those bank statements and, my mom and dad and everybody's crying and, we're crying and not a whole lot was said. And they were prepared. They thought they're going to need an intervention. Like they didn't know what to expect because I had never given them any sense that I wanted help or I was willing to get help or, I had never thought I was. But in that moment when they said, they didn't even ask, they just said, Harry, we know We know it's drugs. We know it's drugs. Are you willing to get help? Was the only thing they said. And in that moment, for the first time ever, in those last years of just living in pain, I didn't have another lie in me. And I didn't want to make up a story, and I didn't want to explain myself, and I just said yes. I didn't know
tired.
I was like, I just said yes. I was beat up. I was exhausted. I was sick. And I said yes. And I didn't even know what help looked like. I didn't know what treatment was. I had this idea of rehab that you'd seen on TV, but I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I was tired, and I knew at that point I had tried everything I could think of to stop on my own, everything, and nothing worked. And I was in a place where I believed that I was just going to die this way, and I had accepted that, and I had this sense that my daughter would be better off without me, and my family would be better off without me. And that's the part that's so sad, is I was willing to accept that before putting my hand up and say, hey guys, I really need some help. To the people that love me.
Right.
To the people that love me. I was more ashamed, not ashamed, I was afraid to put the shame that I felt about me on them by telling them what I was doing and who I was as a person.
That you were just willing to just check out.
Yeah.
Instead of waving the flag and saying, hey,
yeah,
I'm ready to get some help.
Because that's how deep it was. Like, that's how much I believed that, like, if they knew what I was doing, they would want nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather try to protect that image and potentially die in the process than just say, hey, this is who I am, and I need help.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. And families think that families need some help when they're dealing with this thing, man. It goes a lot deeper than they can ever imagine.
Yeah.
Of how to communicate with their loved one.
No, my mom, for years she tried to figure out what to do. What got her to that point, at the end, was she found a woman who ran a parent support group. And I think she maybe went to one or two of the support groups, and she asked this woman for coffee. And, the way she tells it now is like they went for coffee and stayed for like 6 hours, but it was very clear. Mm-hmm. She got some good direction from this other parent who had been through this and made it very clear to her that she was, the things that she was afraid of were accurate, and I probably was struggling with drugs. And she gave her advice on what to do about it and to, begin to hold a boundary and, call it for what it was.
So the pain that whatever and all of the crap that family had to go through at some point to get that woman to a place where she had the experience to be able to share to your mom changed your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works. That's why I love family support groups. Intervention on Call is a family support group every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. We have families returning week after week after week, and it's free. There's no pressure, and they get some solution, and they share their experiences. They're able to help other families, and change happens from that. I'm here today because of a support group. My mom started going to a family support group and got some information. My sister started going. My mom went up to Pennsylvania to a trauma intensive for some codependency stuff and came back. But even before that, it started with a support group.
Yeah. I mean, we put so much, it's like when I'm the person who's struggling, all the emphasis and focus is on me. Mm-hmm. And it's like everybody else is caught in the crossfire. Like the siblings, the parents, the common expression, right? It's like the airplane. You got to put your mask on first before you help someone else. Like parents have to find a way to take care of themselves.
Yeah. How many siblings did you have?
I have two.
Two siblings.
Two brothers.
And two brothers. Older? Two older brothers?
One older, one younger.
So you're the middle child.
I'm the middle child.
Right? But you were taking up a lot of the parents' attention, a lot of their energy.
Yeah.
So did the siblings feel like they were left out of some things? It felt like they didn't struggle the way that you struggled, correct?
No, they didn't.
One may have been an overachiever or a high achiever or...
Yeah, so my older brother, he grew up and was, you know, he was that high achiever kind of from the start, right? So his grades were great. He was an athlete. You know, he went off to college. You know, when this is going on, he got his first job. His first job was, you know, in the White House. First job out of college. He's working in the White House, traveling around with the president on a campaign on Air Force One while I'm doing this, right? So, you know, like both of them are troopers. My younger brother's a, you know, teenager, you know, finishing up high school, and I'm just sucking all the oxygen from both of them. You know, and they were both troopers. They, you know, when I got into treatment, they got, you know, some education, they got some support, and they right away dove in to support me.
Were they pissed off at you for a while? Was y'all's relationship strained?
Not, honestly, no. Like
Really?
they were incredible about it.
The
you
whole
know,
time, even when you were running them
I
up?
mean, when I was out there causing a mess, they were, you know, they were pissed off at me then. But like from the moment I went to go get help, like they had my back 100%. They've never, you know, like never pushed back on, you know, kind of like what they went through as a result of it.
Family was engaged while you were in treatment?
Yeah.
They were engaged in their own stuff?
Everybody. Yeah.
How
Everybody
long were you
jumped
in treatment?
So I signed up for 28 days. I thought that was it. I didn't know there was more than that.
Right.
I had never even heard of a, you know, continuum of care.
Right.
Because
there was a movie, 28 Days, you know? You figure
I
that's
just
what
thought
treatment is,
rehab
28
was
days.
28 days.
Yeah.
And you go and you're, you know, you're kind of cured.
Yeah.
Again, when I went to treatment, there was nobody in my life that I could identify that was in recovery.
Mm.
Right now, I know today that that's not true. There were people in recovery all around me, but I didn't identify them as somebody in recovery. So I didn't know that this thing worked.
Mm.
I had friends that went to rehab and they came back and were still using. So like I didn't have high hopes when I got there, but I was willing to try. But, you know, so I went for 28 days. And I was fortunate. My family was able to get me into a really good place that day. You know, from the moment I said yes at the dining room table, you know, 5 minutes later, I'm on the phone with an admission specialist, and an hour later, we're in the car driving to treatment. Bags are packed. We're on the way. I didn't have enough time to reconsider. It was just boom, we were ready. My mom had set that up before.
They did a proper intervention before. Yeah. They probably got some coaching from the admission staff as well.
Yeah, they got
hey,
some support.
When he says yes, go.
They had the facility identified. They had everything ready to go.
Right.
You know, so I get up there for 28 days. And again, my experience when I got there was, you know, one of the most powerful things that I heard, right, was like I got there and I expected to, you know, just feel this constant shame, right? Just like, oh, I'm going to, you know, to rehab with all these other people that are, you know, I wanted to believe were worse off than me. And, you know, and I get there and I was just met with empathy and compassion, right? Like from the support staff and everybody at that facility, I just felt like people cared about me, you know, and they saw me as just a human, you know, who was struggling. And there was a guy, there's a priest who worked there at the time, this guy, Father Bill. And, you know, he would kind of walk around the campus, you know, and it wasn't like, there was no religion in the program at all, right? But like this guy was just, you know, he was like a spiritual counselor that you could opt into if you wanted it or not. But this guy, you know, Father Bill, caught me walking out of the cafeteria the one day. And he stopped me and he used my name. He said, "Hey, Harry, how are you?" And I couldn't even believe anybody would know my name.
Right.
This guy knew my name. And, you know, he asked me that. And I go into this long story about how bad I am and my life is a mess. And he just said, "Harry, you're not a bad person trying to get good. You're a sick person trying to get well." Mm-hmm. And like that for me just changed, you know, like it changed my perspective. Because
you hear that a lot now.
You hear it all the time. Now I hear it all the time. But like for me in the moment, it was like, this is this profound thing because it was an identity shift.
Right.
Of like it allowed me to say, maybe I'm not a bad person. Because when I felt as bad about myself as I did, I didn't think I deserved to get better, right? Like if I'm this bad of a person, I don't deserve to get better. But if I'm sick, like maybe there's a shot. Maybe I can get better. And yeah, it's like we hear that all the time now. But like for me as somebody who had been living in this struggle, it was just profound.
Eye-opening.
Yeah. it was so simple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's all these expressions and, you know, phrases in recovery that we hear all the time that, like, you know, now years later, it's like, you know, yeah, it makes sense. But like sometimes, you know, it might be the first time you hear it, it might be the 10th, but like sometimes for people, they just click.
Yeah.
But anyway, I signed up for 28 days and found out, you know, about 3 weeks in that I wasn't coming home after 28 days. You know, the team there had decided I needed to go to longer term transitional living. So, you know, I fought that as hard as I could, and I lost that battle. My family held the boundary, and they said, you know, well, you can't come home.
You probably presented some compelling evidence.
Yeah, I had a
some
kid.
good reasons that you needed to come home.
I had a daughter I needed to get back to. I had a job I thought I needed to get back to. I had, you know, all of this stuff that, you know, but my daughter being the primary driver of like, look, guys, I've got a 1-year-old baby at home. I've been away a month. I'm doing better. I've got to get back. And, you know, but like the treatment center worked with my family and they explained to them what this looked like. And it was, you know, it got to the point where at the end, I ended up staying in that place for an extra like 3 to 4 days because, you know, my parents were like, well, you can't come home. And the place was like, well, you can't, you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know, you're either here, you can stay here, or, you know, we'll put you in a van and we'll take you to this sober living house. And I fought it and fought it and fought it. My parents held the line. And I said, fine, let's go. And
so you weren't really surrendered then at that point?
No.
You had done 28 days. You were eating better, sounding better, had some realizations.
My parents saw that, like, I looked better. I sounded better. They thought I was doing better.
You were still
But
insane.
they knew enough, you know, from the professionals that I wasn't the one to be making that decision.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
and
still
and
some
they believed
insanity
it.
going
on. Yeah. A lot of it. And I look back at that and like that was, you know, one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made was to say yes to that. But like absolutely a turning point in my life. Cause like that's where the surrender started to happen. And what happened after that was I get to this sober living that I think is going to be awful. And it's actually a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm with a bunch of, you know, 22-year-old guys.
Yeah.
Who have no jobs. We've got nothing going on.
Yeah, brand new lease on life.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
And like people are laughing again. They're having like they would take us like bowling or to the movies, and it was like
bowling.
It's always bowling. And I hate bowling.
Yeah.
I still hate bowling.
Yeah, me too.
But it was fun, right? Like it took away all this pressure. And what happened was, you know, I thought when I got there, it was almost Christmas. I had done Thanksgiving in treatment and, you know, I'm like, I'm just going to stay here. They want me to stay 90 days. Christmas is going to come in a couple weeks. I'm going to go home. They'll send me on a home pass and I just won't come back. But I go home on that home pass and I get to my parents' house and it is the most uncomfortable experience of my life.
Right.
Walking back in there after being away for, you know, 6, 7, 8 weeks of treatment. And all of a sudden I walk back and I'm not high. They don't know how to handle me. They don't know. You know, they want to protect me.
Yeah.
They want to, you know, keep me from using that bar that I talked about earlier where, you know, they were with my friend's parents. You know, I went in there when I got home and all of the liquor bottles are covered in cellophane, right? Like my mom didn't know what to do, but she was like, maybe this will, you know, like this is a barrier. Like cellophane is going to stop me. But it was
she wrap it up? She wrapped it up.
All right. She wrapped it up.
Did you ask like
years
Mama,
later?
Why did you do this?
Years later we talked. Apparently there's like in bars they do it, but it's for fruit flies. She thought it was like for theft, but it's to keep the fruit flies out.
Right.
But
that's hilarious.
So I get there and as soon as I get home, I'm like, I got to get back to this sober living house because like it is much easier for me to, you know, stay here.
Yeah.
So I ended up back. Completed that program, and then, you know, I did come home after 4 months, you know.
That's crazy. You know, that feeling that you have when you first walk back into your family's lives when you've been gone for so long. I mean, I remember the first time I saw my family after I was in treatment for a year and then lived in Texas for a while. Went home for a visitation after about 14 months of being away from them. And even 14 months sober, 14 months of them doing their own stuff. It was still awkward when you walk into the door and there they are.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you say? How was rehab? How are you?
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah. So,
Well, I think, it's like for me, I put this the second I got into treatment, I started counting the days until I was back home. Because I thought I was convinced I just have to get back to my life.
mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I went back home that I realized I had no life really to go back to. Like I had to start over. So my expectations were so high of like, I've got to get back home. And, I think like, I've worked with a lot of families since then that, have somebody in treatment and they're pushing to come home and pushing to come home.
Mm-hmm.
But like my expectations were like, I'm going to get back. I don't use drugs anymore. Everything's going to be great. And it wasn't. All the damage was still there. There was no trust. Rightfully so. No trust, no confidence, no ability to communicate. All of that had to be relearned. And I realized the best thing that I could do was go back and focus on trying to learn some of those recovery skills and learn some of those communication skills to be able to figure out what is this going to look like? Because eventually I have to go back, right? Like I can't stay in treatment forever. I have to get back. I do have to get back to my daughter. I've got to get back to my work.
Yeah.
And I've got to start to build a new life. Like that was the thing for me. It wasn't, I wanted nothing to do with the life that I left behind on October 30th, 2012. Like that was gone. I needed to start over.
How's it been?
Has
it been what you expected?
No.
Yeah.
No. I remember they talked about, you can have this life beyond your wildest dreams. And I kept that, really simple. When I was in treatment, a life beyond my wildest dreams, if I bring it back, is as simple as just waking up and not wanting to get high. Because when I was in treatment, I could not fathom that. That didn't seem like a possibility for me.
Right.
The way that I used, the way that I obsessed, the way that I craved, I didn't think that I could wake up and not want to get high. I thought maybe I could do it, but I would still always want it. And, after the first couple months, like that obsession lifted, right? And it's stayed lifted for me since then. I only went to treatment once. I've been in recovery since. I got to continue to work on it, every day. But the work looks different today. Like now it's what I want to do. It's about finding that peace that we talked about at the beginning, right? Like when I do work on me in this process or, take time to meditate, things that I, would have thought were not where my life was going when I got out. I can find that peace today. But, go ahead.
When did your mom and dad start to trust you again, you think? How long did that take after you got out and about?
It took a few months to, really begin to start, and I think over the past few years, like my mom and I both trust each other more today than we did before any of this ever happened.
Sure.
Right? Like we have developed, and my dad and my brothers and everybody, we've developed a much deeper, more honest relationship as a result of this process. But it took a while. Like I remember I was going to meetings in the beginning and, I think like my mom would like follow me, in the car, and I never even saw her. Like I learned about some of this right in the book. Like, they had incredible fear.
Right.
Incredible fear, and it took a long time because again, I had no reason to be trusted, right? Like everything up until that point from, for years before I got into treatment was a lie. Everything I told them, everything I did, my whole life was a lie. And then I get out and the expectations are hard because now, I go away for 4 months. I'm sober 4 months. I know that I haven't used drugs and I feel good about the work that I'm doing, but they haven't seen it yet.
Right.
They have no track record of proof to know that I'm actually doing as well as I say I am because I said I was doing well for years.
Yeah.
So it took months to like really start to begin to have some of that trust, but I don't know when it fully shifted, but probably well after I had more than a year
Do you remember when anyone in your family, the trust starts to come back? And do you remember when I remember when my dad asked me for some advice on a certain matter. And that completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
It blew me away.
Yeah.
Like that had not happened before.
Yeah.
That had never happened before. Like, I mean, I went to work for the family business at 18 and addiction started. Like my behaviors weren't demonstrating that I was someone that you would want to come to and ask my advice on something. Like until years after sobriety.
Yeah.
Still, I may question those people that come to me for some advice on some things. But I remember when my dad came to me and wanted my suggestion and my opinion on something, and that meant the world to me.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. I remember that, and I remember just sitting with that after he asked me that for the rest of the day and night, just sitting with that going, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. That was huge for me. Do you remember that? Did you have an experience?
I mean, there's a bunch of those. The one that, comes to mind, honestly, like as you're telling that, is like there was a moment, so my mom got into, public service and politics. And there was this moment with and it wasn't just me, right? But it was our whole family kind of coming back together. So I had been this just, fire in our house for years. But as I started to do better, others in my family were allowed the opportunity to focus on, themselves and do more and be more and grow. And in, I guess it was 2017, my mom, we had sort of like a family meeting and my mom was going to run for Congress. And the way all of us came together in different ways, from my dad, my mom, but the way that I could play a real role in that and support her in chasing this dream, that she could make this run and, try for something to, get into public service at a level that, she'd always dreamed of. To watch the family just come together, as a whole unit to support that. That's what I think of. 'Cause like had my story gone differently, had I not gotten help, had, everything would have looked so different. Right. And like, it's a miracle.
Did her opponents bring up your past? Did they try
not at the time.
Not at the time.
No, there's, not, and her opponents have never really touched it. Like the Twitter comments will sometimes go after, but honestly, I
mentioning your problem, mentioning your history.
Yeah.
Some Twitter comments.
Yeah. But honestly, what's
has that
been
affected
amazing,
you? Or are you like,
Not much, but I would say yes, right? Like, if I see something, it's like, all right, that, it can sting for a little bit. But what I'll say is, so, we had the opportunity and right as she was, right after she was elected, essentially to publish a book. So we came out with a book in 2020, very, politically contentious time. But we write this family story. It's a family memoir about addiction and recovery. And we're talking about in dual perspectives, what she went through as a mother and what I went through, both through active addiction, into treatment, into recovery, and kind of like up to that point. And in 2020, incredibly contentious time, we come out with this book, we do a media tour, we're out there, it's public. She's officially, a sitting member of Congress. And I will tell you the number of negative comments were so small. Right? Like the overwhelming response that we got from all sides was people
both
coming
sides
up. Both sides. Just from everybody was people coming up and sharing their story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like they saw it as an opportunity to get vulnerable back with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when I think about that, like, there was a lot of fear when we did it, of like, all right, we're going to put this out there. And, she's in a very public position. And we were worried about, I was like, when we started writing it, I had 5-6 years in recovery. did I feel sort of stable enough in that to put my story out there and, God forbid something happens in the future. But our hope was like, if we can just share this, it's not a how-to. It's not a how-to recover book. But it's one family's experience that, hopefully can have something that others can relate to and can maybe help one person.
Book been successful?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, again, like success was measured by like when we set out to do it, it was like, if we can help one person.
And you got it done, right?
Yeah, we got it done.
To write a book.
Yeah. And the experience to be able to do that with my mom.
Yeah.
To go through and really relive and go into detail of what we had actually been through gave us such an opportunity to grow so much closer in our relationship, because so much of what's in a book, otherwise would have never come out. We would have never processed through it together in that way. So, selfishly, it's incredibly valuable.
Where can the audience get a copy of it?
Anywhere books are sold. It's called Under Our Roof.
Under Our Roof.
Yeah. So we did that, and then we also did, which is sort of, kind of something that I was really excited about. After we, finished that book, the publisher came back to us and said, hey, we've got, in our children's arm, we've got somebody who's interested in maybe doing a children's book. So we also had the opportunity to write a children's book called You Are Always Loved, which doesn't talk about, any of the specifics or the language of drugs, but it talks about from, I did it thinking of, my oldest daughter at the time, but I've now I'm a father of 4. But thinking about like that kid who's growing up that has a parent, when I was struggling in that first year of my daughter's life, like I loved her and I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And I couldn't show her love, regardless of how I felt. I couldn't show it. I was incapable. I was caught up in addiction. And, so the hope with that is really that the book is an opportunity for people to have conversation about like the emotions that go along with this. Mm-hmm. For a kid who's dealing with that, whether it's with a parent or a grandparent or somebody that they care about, to know that, regardless of how someone is showing up in their life, it's not their fault. And that person may love them, but just may be incapable of showing it right now.
Definitely.
And so for me, that's been just such a cool thing to have, with my kids today, and, hopefully is valuable for others with theirs, to just have difficult conversations. Yeah. And again, it's not about drugs. It's about emotions. It's about how we feel, because when you're a kid and you're, that little, the world is, everything feels like it's your fault.
Yeah.
Like if they're struggling, it's because of me.
Yeah. Everything's about us at that age. Everything. Harry, Cunnane, thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Appreciate
you
fun. Coming on. Yeah, it's been
Thanks
a great
for having
episode.
me.
Great episode. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. That's it for today. Always remember, please, please, please be good to yourself. And if you want a copy of the book, you can get it anywhere.
Anywhere books are sold.
Anywhere books are sold.
Under Our Roof.
Under Our Roof. Harry Cunnane, ladies and gentlemen. Is it Cunnane?
Cunnane.
Cunnane. I thought it was Cunnane.
Cunnane? Yeah.
I say Cunnane.
Nobody gets it right. I don't even correct people anymore. Nobody gets it. So
right. It's going to be Cunnane from
Cunnane.
Here.
There we go.
I got you. I'm gonna say your name right from here on out. My apologies. Harry Cunnane, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for the show. Remember, if you have a loved one that's struggling with addiction, and you're struggling along with them, not knowing what to do, feeling like there's no hope at all, book an appointment with a provider at interventiononcall.com today. An hour can change your life. Y'all be good.